we're going to be talking about something that could be really tough to deal with, and that's healing after infidelity.
Absolutely. It's a topic that many people unfortunately experience in their lives.
Yeah, we've all heard those stories, maybe even experienced it ourselves, and it can be completely devastating. So, to help us understand this a little better, I'm really excited to have Dr. Emily joining us today. She's a clinical psychologist with over 15 years of experience helping people through these really tough times.
It's great to be here. And you're right, infidelity can really rock your mind.
So, Dr. Emily, one of the first things that I think hits you is just that sheer intensity of the pain. It goes way beyond just feeling sad. Why is that?
Well, it really does. It's a deep, visceral pain. And the fascinating thing is that science actually shows us why. When we experience this kind of emotional betrayal, our brains, they actually react in a way similar to how they react to physical pain.
So, what you're saying that feeling physically sick, like you mentioned, that deep visceral pain or the insomnia or the loss of appetite, it's not just all in your head.
Exactly. It's not just in your head, it's a full body trauma response. Your brain is processing a real wound, a real injury, and that's why people often describe it feeling like they've been punched in the gut or like they can't breathe. It's a real physiological reaction.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. So, just knowing that it's a natural physiological response, it's not just you being dramatic in some way.
Right.
That must be a huge step towards healing, just knowing that.
Absolutely. And it's so important to remember that there's no right way to feel, anger, sadness, confusion, self-doubt. All of these are completely normal reactions to this kind of betrayal.
It's so crucial to validate those feelings, I think, too, and realize that, so many others are going through this. Statistics show that infidelity is sadly more common than we might think.
It really is. Yeah. Global surveys suggest that nearly 1 in 3 people have experienced infidelity in some form. And, during times of heightened stress, like what we all went through during the pandemic, those numbers actually increased.
It's really eye-opening to hear those statistics. I think sometimes we think, oh, it's just me or it's just this. But, it makes you think as a society, if we need to have more open conversations about this, it's clearly something that is impacting people across the globe.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to point out that infidelity isn't always as blatant as an affair. It can take different forms.
It can. It really can.
And sometimes those lines are blurred. So, we've been talking about the pain and understanding that pain, but eventually you might have to face that difficult decision about staying in a relationship or moving on. How can someone even begin to approach such a huge decision?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. It's such a personal decision, and it's so important to prioritize your well-being above all this. Really think about what's best for you.
So I guess there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Definitely not. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. There are so many factors to consider.
Like what kind of things?
Well, think about it. Was this a one-time lapse in judgment? Or has there been a pattern of betrayal? Is your partner genuinely remorseful? And I mean truly remorseful, not just offering those empty apologies, but actually demonstrating a commitment to change through their actions. And maybe even most importantly, can you envision yourself rebuilding that trust? Or will that doubt always linger in the back of your mind?
Those are some really tough questions to consider, and I imagine there's no easy answer.
No, not at all.
But ultimately, you have to trust your gut.
You do. You have to trust your intuition.
And choose what feels right for you.
Absolutely. Sometimes walking away is the strongest and healthiest choice, even though it's incredibly painful. And sometimes choosing to stay and rebuild is the right path, but it requires a deep commitment from both partners.
And in either scenario, you're going to have to work on rebuilding trust.
Absolutely.
And that's not an easy thing to do. It's not like flipping a switch.
No, it's definitely not an easy thing to do. Think of it more like learning to walk again after an injury. It takes time, patience, consistent effort. You have to start slow, set those clear boundaries, communicate your needs honestly, openly.
So you mentioned boundaries a couple of times.
I did.
And that sounds really key in this whole process. So what does that actually look like? What kind of boundaries are we talking about?
Well, boundaries are all about, clearly communicating your needs, your expectations, what you're willing to tolerate and what you absolutely will not. And this applies whether you're rebuilding within the relationship or moving on.
So for example, if someone is trying to rebuild trust with their partner after infidelity, could a boundary be something like, I need complete transparency about your whereabouts, or I need to know that you're not deleting text messages, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming that sense of agency and control, creating a space where you feel safe and respected.
So you're setting those boundaries to kind of protect yourself and
Exactly.
help you heal.
Yes. And if someone is choosing to leave the relationship, a boundary might be something like, I need space to heal and process this on my own. Please don't contact me unless it's absolutely necessary.
So in both cases, whether you're staying or you're leaving,
Yeah,
it's about setting those boundaries to protect yourself.
precisely. It's about protecting your emotional well being, giving yourself the time and space you need to heal.
Setting those boundaries really sounds like you're taking back your power and
Right.
and kind of defining what you're okay with.
Absolutely.
But even with boundaries, it can still feel really overwhelming
It can.
navigating all of this. So where does therapy fit in? How can that help?
Therapy can be so helpful in these situations. It's like having a safe space where you can unhelp all those complex emotions, the anger, the sadness, the confusion, the self-doubt, all of it without judgment.
Just to have someone to talk to?
Exactly, just having that space to process and make sense of what happened. And a therapist can also help you, develop those coping mechanisms for dealing with all the intense emotions that often come with infidelity. And they can provide guidance on setting those healthy boundaries we were talking about.
It's like having a guide to kind of walk you through this.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just individual therapy that can be helpful. If both partners are willing, couples therapy can play a really crucial role too.
How so?
Well, it can help facilitate communication, rebuild trust, or even guide a couple through a healthy separation if that's the path they choose.
So it's really about having that structured environment
Right.
and that professional support to help you sort through all of those really tough conversations and decisions.
Exactly. And, beyond therapy, I always encourage people to lean on their support network, those trusted friends and family members who can offer a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on without judgment.
Because you need that support.
You do. You really do.
You need those people that you can turn to and just say, hey, this is what's going on.
Right. And just knowing you're not alone in this, that can make such a difference.
Absolutely. And I imagine for some people, connecting with others who've been through similar experiences
Yeah.
can be so validating.
It can be incredibly validating. There are support groups, both online and in person, where you can share your story and hear from others who've walked this path.
It's like a shared wisdom.
Exactly. A shared understanding that comes from a lived experience.
So we've talked about getting support from others,
We have.
but I think self-care is also so crucial.
It is. It's so crucial. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to prioritize your well-being during this time.
So what are some things that people can do for self-care during this time?
Well, one of the most basic but powerful things is prioritize sleep.
Oh yeah, sleep is so important.
It is. When you're sleep deprived, your emotions tend to run higher and everything just feels so much more overwhelming.
So getting a good night's rest,
Absolutely.
it really helps you kind of process things better.
Yes. It allows your mind and body to recharge and process all that emotional turmoil.
And what about exercise?
Exercise is another great one. Moving your body, even if it's just a gentle walk or a quick yoga session, releases endorphins, which have those mood boosting effects.
It's like that reset button.
It is. It
You
really
get those good chemicals flowing.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's what you're fueling your body with, nourishing yourself with wholesome foods can really provide the energy and stability you need to navigate this challenging time.
So it's kind of treating your body
Yes,
with that kindness and respect.
got it.
And then it, in turn, helps you feel better emotionally.
Exactly. And beyond those basics of sleep, exercise, and diet, explore other self-care practices that bring you joy and peace. Maybe it's spending time in nature, listening to calming music, taking a long bath, getting lost in a good book, whatever works for you.
Finding those little things
Yes.
that bring you joy,
Exactly. Those little pockets of peace in your day.
just to reconnect with yourself.
Absolutely. And I also want to highlight the importance of creativity.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's writing, painting, dancing, playing music, any form of creative expression can be incredibly therapeutic.
It's like you're channeling that energy
Yes.
into something positive.
Exactly. It allows you to process those complex feelings and regain a sense of control.
I want to circle back to forgiveness for a moment,
Okay.
because I think it's something that comes up a lot in the context of infidelity. And it can feel so incredibly
It
difficult
can.
after such a betrayal.
It really can. And, as we discussed earlier, forgiveness isn't about condoning or forgetting what happened. It's about releasing yourself from that burden of anger and resentment, which can really keep you trapped in a cycle of pain.
It's not saying what you did was okay.
Right.
It's more like, I'm not going to let this control me anymore.
You nailed it. Forgiveness is primarily for you, not for the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the grip of those negative emotions.
That makes sense, but how do you actually do that?
It's a process, and there's no magic formula. It takes time, patience, a willingness to work through those difficult emotions. But there are a few things that can help. First, remember that hurt people hurt people. Their actions, while hurtful, likely stem from our own unresolved pain or insecurities.
So trying to see them as a human being,
Exactly. As a flawed human being, not just as the villain in your story.
not just this evil person.
Right. It doesn't excuse their actions, but it can help soften that hard edge of anger. And then try to shift your focus from the past to the future. What do you want your life to look like moving forward? What brings you joy? What are your goals and aspirations?
Kind of taking back your narrative.
Exactly. Creating a future that feels authentic and fulfilling.
And that can be really empowering.
It can be incredibly empowering. You start to realize that you have the strength to overcome adversity, to heal, and to create a life that feels good on your terms.
Dr. Emily, this has been so insightful.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I'm sure our listeners are feeling so much gratitude for your wisdom and compassion.
Thank you.
Before we move on to our final segment, I just want to acknowledge that all of this is a lot to process.
It is.
And to our listeners, if you're feeling overwhelmed,
It's okay.
that's okay. Take a deep breath. Remember that healing takes time.
It does.
There's no rush. Okay, so what now? Where do we go from here? How do we actually emerge from this experience?
Well, it all starts with how you view this experience. Instead of seeing it as, this devastating ending, try to view it as a potential new beginning.
So not just surviving infidelity, but thriving afterward.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Infidelity, as painful as it is, can actually be a catalyst for some really profound personal growth.
In what way?
Well, it forces you to confront your vulnerabilities, examine your values, and really get clear about what you need in a relationship.
You're really forced to look inward.
You are. And in that process, you often discover inner strengths that you never even knew you had.
So it's an unexpected journey of self-discovery.
It can be. It really can. You start asking yourself those big questions. What do I truly value in a partner? What are my non-negotiables in a relationship? What brings me joy? What makes me feel truly alive and seen?
And those are tough questions.
They are, but the answers can be so illuminating.
Yeah, it's like you're figuring out who you are.
Exactly. And those answers can guide you towards a future that's more aligned with your authentic self, whether that means rebuilding the existing relationship or creating a new one that honors who you are and what you deserve.
So taking those lessons, sometimes really hard lessons,
Right.
and using them to build something better.
Exactly. And that process of rebuilding it can be so empowering. It's in those moments of picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and choosing to move forward that you really start to understand your own resilience.
And that's a really powerful message for anyone who's feeling lost right now.
It is. You are not defined by this experience. It doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of a new chapter 1 where you are more self-aware, more resilient, and more deeply connected to your own inner strength.
Dr. Emily, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
I know our listeners are walking away feeling validated and empowered and hopefully hopeful.
I hope so.
And to our listeners, before we go, I want to leave you with this. What's one small act of self-care that you can commit to today? Something that will nourish your mind, your body, or your spirit. It could be as simple as, taking a walk in nature, listening to your favorite music, or calling a friend who lifts you up. Remember, healing is a journey, not a destination. And every step you take towards caring for yourself is a step towards reclaiming your strength, your joy, and your wholeness. Thank you for joining us